All right, welcome back, Truth Seeker. Going to talk about the rigged weekend of football, college and pro, because no doubt they're rigged and you can prove it every single time when you have this knowledge of Gematria. But before we start, again, want to give a shout out to Larry Johnson for saying this publicly. I've been trying to get a hold of Larry. So far, he hasn't gotten back to me. Hopefully that changes in the near future. But again, this former professional football player, he recently said this. Let me play this little clip and then we'll get on with the presentation.
I know that. And it's one thing I do love is like the guys. So I'm horrible at math. So the guys do the gematria with the football games and all that. I love the guys that do that with the sports thing. I'm like, I look at them in awe. Like, how do you figure these numbers out? But they do it and they show them to people, and that's why I think in the NFL and most stadiums you see the numbers and ticket prices and all that is going down. That is why you see this whole effeminate agenda coming around with NFL, because they need to fill those seats. That's why you see guy cheerleaders now. They need to fill those seats. They need to be gay friendly so people can just buy and buy and buy. And even if they're streaming at home, they're still adding money to the program. So, and people are like, why are you saying this? You used to play. I'm like, yeah. I said, me speaking about this really goes against me. Like, my annuities and my portfolios in the NFL. It's under the NFL. So if they go down, my stuff goes down. But I feel like you guys' souls mean much to me. So you can see the bigger picture. So you don't have to argue it Wednesday at 3 p.m. with a fan that's a Patriots fan. Y'all guys cussing each other out. It's not even. It's all. It's just all scripted. Like you want me to say, it's like. I can't tell you if I was scripted when I was playing it because I'm underneath that matrix where I'm just running my plays. But when you look at it outside of it, you see these calls that are being called don't make sense. You see the penalties that are happening. Like, so I want people to detach from making NFL football their idol and worshiping it all the time. And I'm not trying to get people to pull back a little bit and see the bigger perspective in life.
And again, very cool that he spoke out as a former player saying those things. Of course, the NFL was scripted when he was in it, and so was college football when he played for Penn State, who suffered a big loss this weekend to Minnesota. And again, with the knowledge of gematria, the practice of coding numbers into words, which is used by Freemasonry, which controls the world of sports and entertainment, you can see through the scripts, and you can often see the outcomes before they happen. You know, if you watch the Saints and Falcons game this morning, we talked about, before the game was played, the very real possibility that the Falcons would win today's game so the NFL can do its thing. You know, claim there's parity in any given Sunday. But you watch a game like that, and who was the MVP of the Falcons and Saints game today? Of course, it was the Zebra. Because anytime the Falcons didn't get a first down, here comes the yellow flag. What happened when the Saints had a big game? Here comes the yellow flag. You have the announcer the whole game saying, man, I've never seen so many hands to the face calls in my life. Man, I've never seen so many hands to the face calls. It's just a joke. They could call that every single play if they wanted to, but they used it all game as a weapon to advance the Falcons down the field and also to ruin drives by the Saints. And there were very serious numbers for the Saints to be upset today, which they were. But let's start with college football, because college football, of course, the game of the week was LSU, Alabama. The whole national media was on Alabama. Guess what side we were on? We were on the LSU side. And a lot of us won nicely this week by seeing how the game was no doubt fixed for LSU. And I mean, look at the plays that happened in the Alabama game. You really think the quarterback's just going to cough up the ball without getting touched? These guys are in on the fix because they know where their destiny is, the NFL. Tua, who coughed up that ball by the numbers, will likely be one of the top picks in the upcoming NFL draft. So anyway, Maryland, Ohio State, no-brainer type of game here. And do realize that all this information is put out before the games. But what you can see even in the no-brainer games week after week is how they're structured and why Ohio State played the Terrapins at this point in the season. Ohio State became 6-0 in the Big Ten. And here, just so you don't have to take my word for it, again, every value I give you is going to be 100% true. But Terrapins, who Ohio State defeated this week. Again, there are 4 base ciphers. You want to know all these ciphers because they're used every single week. These sets of numbers, sometimes multiple numbers that you see on the screen are used in one game's ritual. But anyway, notice the value of terrapins as 60. Again, these 4 ciphers, the alphabetic order with the rules numerology, the reverse alphabetic order with the rules numerology. Perfect team for Ohio State to become 6-0 against in the Big Ten, which is exactly what they did, and they smashed them as expected. I mean, they were a 43.5-point favorite. Penn State and Minnesota was tricky. Jason, if you're out there listening, Jason called me up from Minnesota. He's like, I want to tell my friends that Minnesota's going to win this game, and prove to them further how this study works. And I said, man, the Penn State-Minnesota game is really tight, and it was. But I said, you want to impress your friends, tell them that LSU will beat Alabama. Well, Jason had the right call on Minnesota. He was feeling Minnesota winning the game, and LSU also beat Alabama. But anyway, what was good for Minnesota is this game was played on the day leaving 52 days left in the year. Minnesota equals 52, a number that shows up with Minnesota sports rituals all the time. Think about how Minnesota hosted Super Bowl 52. A lot of times when a team plays on the day of the year that connects to their name, it is a good sign. So Minnesota, big victory, one of their biggest victories in decades, comes on the day leaving 52 days left in the year, beating the 4-seed Penn State. So why was this game a tough call? Because of right here. It was week 11. You're always looking for the numbers that have mathematical relationships with the week you're in. So 11, for example, is the 5th prime number. Prime numbers are those that cannot be divided except for by one of themselves. So 11 is the 5th prime number. The prime numbers before that are 2, 3, 7. What am I missing? 2, 3, 7. I'm missing a prime number. 2, 3, 7. My mind's not working right now. Anyway, 11 is the 5th prime number. So what was going on in this game is Minnesota was on 5 wins versus Penn State. There was a chance they could have stayed on those 5 wins in week 11. And had Minnesota lost, they would have picked up their 5th loss on their home field versus Penn State in week 11. So, more often than not, a riddle like that's going to come through. But this was about something bigger. This was about Minnesota's biggest win in decades, and they did it on the day leaving 52 days left in the year. Also, when you looked at the coaches for this game, it didn't look exactly great for the Minnesota coach. But Penn State Nittany Lions equals 281, the 60th prime, and whoever was going to win this game was going to become 6-0 in the Big Ten. It could have been Penn State or it could have been Minnesota. So Minnesota did become 6-0 against a fitting opponent as well. Penn State Nittany Lions 281, the 60th prime number. And the name of the stadium where Minnesota plays, TCF Bank Stadium, that equals 90. Whoever was going to win this game was going to be 9-0. Ended up being Minnesota. So that was the toughest call of the week. Vanderbilt, Florida, easy one. Gators equals 82. They were a huge favorite. By winning, they became 8-2. Gators 82. Baylor and Texas. This was a close game. Baylor was a slight favorite on the road. I favored Baylor in this game because of this right here. The Baylor coach came in 16-17. That was his coaching record. It was on a date with 59 numerology. 59 is the 17th prime number. So perfect day to even up his record at 17-17. And remember, outside of those being prime numbers, they're also very important numbers to Freemasonry, which runs the show. Modern Freemasonry began in 1717, and then 59 years later in 1776, a nation was established by a bunch of Masons. Of course, America, where the Masonic game of football comes from. Freemasonry equals 59 in Hebrew and in English. So, perfect day to become 17-17 for the Baylor coach. Exactly what he did, and a nail-biter of a game. East Carolina and SMU. This game was in Dallas, Texas, which equals 51. SMU, playing in Dallas, became 5-1 in the American Conference. And East Carolina equals 55. The SMU coach picked up his 55th win by defeating East Carolina. So perfect team to get the 55th win against. LSU and Alabama. Here's how we knew the game of the week looked great for LSU. Again, this game was played on the day leaving 52 days left in the year. Saturday, November 9th. Alabama was on 52 wins versus LSU all time. 52 wins. On the day leaving 52 days left in the year, LSU also equals 52. So Alabama stayed on 52 wins. Plus, on Alabama's home field, they were 23-16-3 versus LSU. And the date numerology, again, was 59, the 17th prime. So Alabama could pick up their 17th loss versus LSU, which they did. The date numerology was also 23. So Alabama stayed on 23 wins on the 23 date numerology and picked up their 17th loss. Perfect with the date numerology. Plus, there was another huge number in this. Alabama had won 31 straight home games. And if you followed me for years, how many times have you heard me talk about Alabama in 31? Remember the year Derrick Henry won the Heisman? The championship game was 31 days later. Alabama, if I'm not mistaken, beat Clemson that year. Alabama 31. Happens again and again. Alabama also equals 13. And remember the other year when Trump announced that he was going to go to the championship game? It was an Alabama-Clemson championship. Alabama won it that year too. Trump announced that he was going to go to the Alabama-Clemson championship on January 3rd, a date that can be written 1/3 or 3-1. So Alabama's home winning streak of 31 games ends at 31. Alabama 31. So the date numerology was perfect for LSU, and the streak at 31 just made too much sense. Huge Alabama number. Kansas State and Texas, this game was super tight. Texas was a 7-point favorite. They won by a field goal. And here's what the narrative was here. Had Texas lost this game, they would have been 9-11 versus Kansas State all-time on the date that can be written 9/11. So that was one thing to look at. However, if Texas won at their home field, they were going to be 8-3 versus Kansas State. Texas Longhorns equals 83. So does football. Big football number. Again, they say the best draft class of quarterbacks in the history of the NFL was 1983. So 8-3. Now, the Texas coach, he was going for his 23rd win on the 23 date numerology, and he did get it in a nail biter. He also stayed on 17 all-time losses on the 59 date numerology, 59 the 17th prime. The opposing coach, Chris Kleiman, he had a name gematria of 59. But there were some things there that could have gone Kansas State's way as well, like Texas falling to 9-11 on the date. So very close game. And again, oftentimes when the riddles are very tight, so are the games. Wake Forest and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, they got Wake Forest good in this game. Wake Forest was ranked. They were a slight favorite on the road. Virginia Tech got the W here. Hokies equals 31 and 32. And notice coming into the game, the Hokies were 2-2. And Wake Forest was 3-1. So with a Hokies win, both teams would be 3-2. And that ended up being the narrative for this game. Sometimes you run into things like this, which was tricky. The Virginia Tech coach all-time was 56-41. Wake Forest happens to equal 42 and 57. So it's like, ooh, which way do you go with that? But ended up being the conference record here for the Hokies that took the cake. Both teams becoming 3-2 in the ACC. Versus the Hokies. UConn and Cincinnati. Cincinnati was a huge favorite in this game. If Cincinnati was going to win, they were going to be 13-3. Football's 133. Plus, the Cincy coach was going for his 23rd win on the 23 date numerology. UConn equals 23. And Huskies equals 29. He was 22-11. He stayed on 11 losses in week 11 with Cincy. So he picked up his 23rd win with Cincy. And then all-time, because he's coached other teams, he picked up his 29th win over the Huskies, and Huskies is 29. Iowa and Wisconsin, this was a tight riddle right here too, and it ended up being a very tight game. I know it went right down to the wire. Let's see. I forget actually who even won this game. I think Wisconsin won it at the end. Yeah, Wisconsin won it 24-22, but here's what you were looking at for this game. And again, when the riddles are tight, the games are usually super tight. So, Iowa led 4-3 when both teams were ranked. 4-3. And this game was in Wisconsin. Wisconsin equals 44. Madison, comma, WI, like how you'd write the location, like how they do for the game, also equals 44. 44, big number with Wisconsin. So if Iowa was going to lose, they were going to become 4-4 versus Wisconsin when both teams are ranked as they are. Now, what made it tricky is Wisconsin also had a chance to pick up their 44th loss in the series all time. Wisconsin came into this game leading 46-43 in 2 ties. Week 11 is also 44. So very tight narrative. You get a very tight game. Wisconsin wins in a nail-biter. And Iowa does become 4-4 versus Wisconsin when both teams are ranked. The Wisconsin coach, there was also a chance that he could have picked up his 34th loss, and Hawkeyes does equal 34. So, close narrative. Again, what I always tell my people is in a close game, take the underdog to cover, because that's usually a good call. Had you done that with Iowa, as long as they lost by 9 or less, you were okay, and they did. Missouri and Georgia. Georgia was a big favorite here. Week 11, again, the 5th prime number. Georgia was going for their 5th win in the SEC, plus they could keep Missouri on 5 wins for the season. So that was that. The Missouri coach also picked up his 23rd loss on the 23 date numerology. And again, you just go through the games, you decode the games week after week, you see how the date numerology will line up with so many games, the week placement will line up with so many games. It's just the same thing week after week as I continue to demonstrate. And then Clemson and North Carolina State. Obviously, Clemson, huge favorite here. But the North Carolina State coach, he got his 39th loss all time against the Clemson Tigers. Tigers 39. So, perfect opponent to pick up the 39th career loss. And then Notre Dame and Duke. The Notre Dame coach stayed on 59 all-time losses on the 59 date numerology. Notre Dame, I'm surprised they weren't more of a favorite playing Duke, but anyway, there wasn't a whole lot to go off in that game, but Notre Dame the coach staying on 59 losses seemed like a no-brainer type of thing. Oklahoma, they were big favorites. They barely won this game. Iowa State rallied late, but what really stood out about this game is the Oklahoma State coach could get his 32nd career win. Iowa State, the opponent equals 32. And the Iowa State coach picked up his 23rd loss on the 23 date numerology. He also stayed on 59 overall wins. So again, you just got to say, what are the odds that you can go through this many games and this many sync up with the date numerology and every single week? This is proof that it's scripted and planned. Definitively. And then the Wyoming and Boise State game, another nail-biter. Boise State was a big favorite at home. Again, it was week 11, the 5th prime. Boise State was going for their 5th win in the conference, which they got. And the Wyoming coach, he stayed on 34 wins. Boise State equals 34. So that was that. Wyoming fell to 3-2 in the Mountain West Conference. Boise alone's 32. And yeah, so anyway, week after week, the exact same thing. That was college football. And again, this knowledge pays dividends. You have to put work in to figure out the results. It takes time to go through every game and look up the coach's record and the team's head-to-head records and count up the wins and losses on each team's respective home field. So, there is a lot of effort to do this. I put in hours every single day, but hard work, it pays off. And this is also why you have things like Rationale Wiki, which we exposed the other night, writing bullshit articles, trying to make it look like what I do is fraudulent when I prove my points week after week, day after day. Tune into last night's NFL live stream on the Patreon. Gentleman called in who's only been following me for a few weeks, and he said he's already up $10,000. He said it's amazing how all these trolls just live on your page and talk shit all day. He said it's obvious that, they're here to try to discredit this work because it is lucrative knowledge. And it sure is. Now, before we get into NFL Week 10, I'm going to call myself out. I had a case of the small cojones this week, and I didn't trust in my own work because I saw so many upsets, including the Titans beating the Chiefs, the Falcons beating the Saints, the Browns winning, and I didn't trust the Browns. I pretty much saw every game right this morning, but I didn't believe it all because sometimes the riddles don't come through, and I was like, it looks like there's going to be all these major upsets today. It's like, I mean, am I really going to trust the Falcons to beat the Saints at home? Well, I should have. So anyway, I had a case of the small cojones this morning. Thursday night football, the riddle for this game was it was the first game of Week 10, and the Raiders won, improving to 5-4 on the season on the day leaving 54 days left in the year. It was their last game on prime time in their stadium because they're moving to Las Vegas next year. Prime time equals 54. And the concern for this game, what was tough about this game, is had the Chargers won, they would have been 5-5. This is the first game of Week 10. 55 is the 10th triangular number. But at the same time, if the Raiders were to win, which they did, home teams were going to become 5-5 on Thursday Night Football. And I've been telling my followers all year, I expect the Raiders to get bones thrown their way since it's the last year in Oakland, you know. And the Raiders, they won on a final drive where the Chargers didn't even try to tackle. So the Lions and Bears game, again, case of the small cojones. I told my followers here it looked like the Bears were going to win. They were going to improve to 4-5 on the season. Bears equals 45. Stafford would get his 45th career away loss against the Bears 45. I mean, normally that right there is a great riddle. Also, the Lions were going to fall to 3-5-1. Here, I'll just show you what I wrote for my note about this game. Well, I'll show you all the information too. So Stafford, he came into this game 29-44 and won away. Bears 45, just like what's written there. He had a chance to stay on 10 wins versus the Bears in Week 10. And again, if the Lions lost, they would be 3-5-1. 351 is the 26th triangular number. The word bear equals 26. Again, just a reminder, last year in the Super Bowl, only one touchdown scored in the game. By number 26, to give the AFC its 26th Super Bowl. That game was 351 days after Sony Michel's birthday. He scored that only touchdown at the 53rd minute of the game in Super Bowl 53 between the Patriots and Los Angeles. Patriots 53, Los Angeles 53. Something we had right before the season began. But here's what I wrote. And the reason I wrote this is because Trubisky's on 18 wins. He wears the number 10. I was wondering if he might get it straightened out here in Week 10. And he did. The Bears won today. But I wrote neutral. The most surface level riddles, the team records say Bears over Lions, but the QB and coach stats are very conflicting. I was worried about Trubisky, and I've been worried about Trubisky for weeks, where we've been able to call games against the Bears, because he was on 18 wins coming into this game, and Bears equals 18. And the national media has been calling for him to be benched and for the Bears to move on to another quarterback. And I mean, honestly, Trubisky's not that bad of a player. The NFL's all scripted, so it's hard to tell who's real and who's legit. You know, I guarantee you play pickup football and you put Trubisky on one team and Tom Brady on the other and it's not fixed, I guarantee you Trubisky's team wins every time. Way more of an athlete. Tom Brady, he's just the beneficiary of the National Fixed League. Again, 9/11, Patriot Act, Patriots, in-your-face type of stuff. But anyway, the Bears had the better riddle. Just, I doubted myself. The Ravens and Bengals, I took the Ravens in this game. I said Ravens win, they'll be 4-1 like Baltimore's 41, and they play at LA next. LA's 41. And anyway, not like that was a hard call, right? Ravens over the Bengals. So Ravens were a 10-point favorite in Week 10. They won by a whole lot more than that. Now the Bills and Browns game. Top note right here. Teams would be 6-3 and 6-3 with the Browns win. Browns equals 91, which is the 13th triangular number. Cleveland Browns equals 169, which has a square root of 13. First Energy Stadium equals 233, the 13th Fibonacci number. So the Browns have 3 connections to the number 13. They were looking for their first home win this season to improve to 1-3 at home. Of course, they got the star player Odell Beckham, number 13. They play the Steelers next week. Their next home game is against the Steelers, Steelers equals 31, the reflection of 13. So I told my people, that looks like the strongest riddle. It looks like it's the Browns, But again, I had small cojones this week. I don't know why. There were just something felt wrong to me this week about the games. I don't trust the Browns. They have squandered a few good riddles this season, but like I wrote, neutral, this is a dangerous pick because the Browns have squandered many riddles. But that said, them becoming 1-3 at home with the win and having as many 13 connections as they do as a team seems to be the strongest narrative on the board. Well, it was because the Browns won in a nail-biter of a game. And I saw the highlight on that last field goal. Man, that ball sure moved a whole lot to miss. Again, I'm telling you, they're using technology in sports. Chiefs and Titans. Let me just show you what I wrote again. Again, case of the small cojones. So I wrote pick neutral. More lines up for Titans, but I don't trust Titans in this matchup. Also, I think it was wise to make sure Mahomes is healthy since he is returning from an injury. If you play, I take the Titans to cover. And the Titans did win this game. And just to show you the things in the decode that made it look better for the Titans, the Chiefs were going to stay on 10 wins versus the Titans at Tennessee in Week 10, which is normally a great sign, and of course it was. Let me see. It was 54 days after Mahomes' birthday. Tennessee Titans is 54. Mahomes stayed on 10 away wins in Week 10. And let's see. There wasn't anything real clear with Andy Reid. If the Chiefs were going to lose, they were going to fall to 4-1 away, and they play at LA next. LA's 41. Same thing we just talked about in the other game with the Ravens going into LA 4-1 for their next away game. And Kansas City Chiefs equals 64. With a loss, they were going to fall to 6-4. And let's see. What else was there? If the Titans were going to win, they were going to be 3-2 at home. Kansas City's 32, Chiefs is 32, NFL's 32, America's 32, 32 teams in the NFL. So, and then the other thing was with the Titans, they could improve to 5-5. Again, 55 is the 10th triangular number, NFL Week 10. And I saw the highlight for the end of that game. You know, Andy Reid, considered one of the greatest football coaches ever. What kind of call was that at the end of the game to set up the whole comeback drive for the Titans? You know, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. So, the referee on the field, Tony Corrente, his name equaled 64, and I pointed out how the Chiefs could fall to 6-4. A lot of times the refs are the riddle. So the Falcons and Saints game. Really kicking myself here for this one because Falcons were one of those huge payouts today, and I'm sure some of my followers did take it because we talked about it here. But I was just having trouble believing in the Falcons upsetting the Saints, even though the numbers said there was a great chance for it. So, here's what it was. It was all about Drew Brees. Drew Brees had a chance to pick up his 48th loss at home. Atlanta's 48. And Drew Brees had a chance to stay on 10 wins at home against the Falcons and pick up his 10th loss against the Falcons. NFL Week 10. Again, in college where we began, it was Week 11 for college. It starts a week before NFL. NFL, it was Week 10. So the 10s went heavy against Brees. The 48th home loss in the regular season. I mean, I am just so irritated with myself. Sometimes I look ahead, and oftentimes when I look ahead, it can hurt me. But Buccaneers equals 91. Saints equals 19, the reflection. And I was thinking, it's 2019. If the Saints win this game and they beat the Bucs next week, they're 9-1 in 2019. That seems kind of symbolic. Jameis Winston can pick up his 19th home loss next week to the Saints. That was why I had the Bucs winning today. I did go with that game because I'm pretty sure Winston will pick up that number 19 home loss against the Saints next week. But I wrote, I'm just so mad at myself because I talked about it through the whole live stream. Falcons have a real shot here. I don't believe it. And because I didn't believe in it, I even decided to pick the Saints in this game. And I'm sure my smarter followers definitely took the Falcons in a parlay because that was some other advice. Do a parlay multiplier with the Falcons. But the one thing that was going against Dan Quinn in this game, let me see, where's Dan Quinn at? Where's he at? The game was on Dan Quinn's 61st day of his age. Louisiana equals 61 where the game was played. 61's the 18th prime. The Falcons could have fallen to 1-8. But this game's like the Tampa Bay game last year in New Orleans where Tampa Bay rolled over the Saints. And you know what? I honestly knew that the Falcons were going to win this game shortly into it, maybe 5-6 minutes into the game, because you can just tell the way that when the officials come out and start officiating the game a certain way, you can just see that you're like, I should have went with that Falcons fix, man, because, again, the only MVP in this game, the only person that mattered on the field was the referee. The referee was an assassin for the Saints today. Anytime the Falcons didn't get the first down, out came the flag. Anytime the Saints had a big play, out came the flag. And the NFL's a joke. I mean, again, they'll decide to call calls when they want to, little dinky things that happen on every play that normally a whistle doesn't get blown for. But if they need a fixed outcome, just count on the zebra. So zebra stole the show in this one. And if you watch the scoring progression in this game, at one point it was 13-9. Let's see. At one point the score was 13-9, the Falcons were up, and then at another point they were up 23-9. You might recall the year we had the Eagles and Patriots Super Bowl figured out after week 3. Because Donald Trump took on the NFL on September 23rd, 23/9, 2:39 is the 52nd prime. It was the year of Super Bowl 52. The flag was sewn in Philadelphia at 239 Arch Street that year. We also saw how the Falcons would be the perfect team for the Riddles, how it would be perfect if they ended up upsetting the Rams in LA and then playing in Philadelphia, the land of 239 Arch Street. So, big numbers. And the year the Packers and Falcons were the NFC Championship, they played again the next season exactly 239 days later. That number shows up a bunch with the Falcons. So anyway, I'm very irritated with myself. I went conservative and used, I tried to use logic, which is always a stupid thing to do in rig sports. I should have trusted what I saw with Drew Brees staying on 10 wins. And it was what I talked about a lot last year. I was like, man, these numbers do not look good at all for Brees. I mean, and then the other thing is I expected the Saints to have a really good season. Like, we killed while Teddy Bridgewater was in because we saw how the whole thing was fixed for Teddy Bridgewater. We didn't think the Saints would lose any steam there. Part of me wonders if he ends up getting back in there as the quarterback for the Saints. Now the Giants and Jets, in the live stream, I told people it looked a lot better for the Jets. It was all about New York and 39. If the Jets were going to win this game, they were going to become 39-39 in MetLife Stadium. New York equals 39. Remember last week in the Monday Night Football game with the Giants and Cowboys, you had the cat on the field while the score was 3-9. I saw there was a 39-yard touchdown in this game. Of course there was. New York and 39. Again and again and again and again and again. The Giants also stayed on 39 all-time wins in MetLife Stadium. And with a riddle like that, so here's everything that happened. By the Giants losing this game today, which they did, the Jets improved to 2-5 at home against the Giants. And really, it's not really home, right? Because they both play on the same field. Giants got more fans. But Giants equals 25, always a big number with the Giants. Last week on primetime, Monday Night Football, there were 25 points scored at the half. Dallas led with 13, Dallas 13. There were 12 points for the Giants. MNF is 12. And so anyway, the Giants, by them winning, they became 2-5. Notice that's what's underlined. Also, by the Giants losing, they became 8-6 versus the Jets today. MetLife Stadium equals 86, the field they both call home. And let's see. Adam Gase got his 25th win in the regular season today by defeating the Giants. The trick there was he could have also got his 33rd loss. New York's 33 as well when you run the alphabetic order in reverse. But 39 is the more important New York number. And again, here it is. The Giants were 39-40 in MetLife Stadium all time. So they stayed on 39. And the Jets evened it up at 39-39. And like I wrote here, neutral, the head-to-head in stadium riddles point to the Jets, but I don't trust the Jets. That was just my whole problem this week. Just things lined up for teams that I hate. And Normally I'll just go with the numbers anyway, but also we had a really good week this week. We dominated. I didn't want people to give their money back this week, so I told people to just play it cool this week with the NFL. And so it wasn't just a case of the small cojones. It was also just being conservative, because a lot of my guys, when they win a ton, they end up putting it all on the table and they end up losing it all, because that's the gambler's mentality. And I always tell people not to do that, but gamblers will be gamblers. So, anyway. And then the Cardinals and Bucks, I did go with this game. I liked the Bucks in this one. By the Cardinals losing, they became 11-10 versus the Bucks. What's today's date? 11-10. It's November 10th. Also, by the Bucks winning, they became 7-5 versus the Cardinals at home. Arizona Cardinals is 75. So both the things in the head-to-head record look great. Plus, Cardinals equals 36. By the Cardinals losing, they became 3-6-1, and by the Bucks winning, they became 3-6. And of course, Bruce Arians, the coach of the Buccaneers, he used to be the Cardinals coach. So now facing his old team, he becomes 3-6 with the Bucks. So I like that too, the fact that he was facing his old team. And then the other thing here was Winston stayed on 39 losses. Arizona equals 39. And I saw that his next home loss is 19, and the Saints dish out that number a whole lot, and his next home game is against the Saints. So I was like, yeah, that makes a lot more sense for him to get that against the Saints than the Cardinals. And I just wrote pick Bucks. I like Winston to pick up his 19th home loss next week versus Saints. I also like that the Bucks can improve to 3-6. So, and if you want to know the rest, well, you got to be a member of Patreon. So, but yeah, again, Gematria, it's the knowledge that can make you a winner. And if you were keeping tabs between all the games we went through, college and pro, the only one that you would have lost on if you took my advice was the Saints. But had you listened to my live stream, you might have won on the Falcons anyway, because we did talk about how they would be a great parlay multiplier, and they had a real narrative to upset. I was just having trouble believing in it. So, anyway, had I stuck with what the research showed me for the NFL, we would have had a spectacular morning. And again, I suspect some of my followers did, because they know that the numbers usually come through. But sometimes I'll try to play it safer than sorry. So that was that. And let me check in with the chat, make sure we're not getting censored. All right, I'm going to leave it there, but I'm going to come back with another live stream, because the other thing I want to talk about is all the deaths in the headlines over this weekend, which began Friday, November 8th, 118, our number of death. There's just, if you've been paying attention to the headlines, all sorts of stories of death this weekend. Young girls on Broadway, Russian professors in the river, the Marlboro Man, a young woman at Atlanta University, and more. There's just been all these headlines of death, and so many of them are encoding 118, again, which represents death, homicide, poisoning. There's even a story about an Indian woman who was a serial killer poisoning people. I believe that headline emerged the evening of Friday, November 8th. So, fire up another live stream here to talk about something other than sports, and we'll be right back. Till next time, Truth Seeker.